Again, Kilgore, in his defense of Ellen White, refers this Baptist minister to Johnson's New Cyclopedia. Now, when BK and I first did this stream a couple years ago, I was looking all over the place to try and find it. Could not find it in time for that thing, and I still would periodically look for it, but it has to be what you would consider divine timing, if you will, providence, that sort of thing. Look what I found. Look at what I found. Okay. Johnson's New Universal Cyclopedia, a scientific and popular treasury of useful knowledge, Volume 3, Part 2, the very one that Kilgore is referring to. It is available right there for your viewing pleasure on Google Books. Check it out. Okay. So when he is talking about amalgamation, right? Kilgore he is dealing with this entry here on page 1040 and 1042. He's dealing with the entry of hybridization or hybridity. Okay. So I'm just going to read a few quotes from here. Okay. Treats the issue of dissimilar kinds, hybridity treats the issue of dissimilar kinds of animals and plants in other words, the offspring of parents which belong respectively to different varieties or species. Few subjects have been so much misunderstood or have given rise to so many superstitions as this. In the olden times, and indeed until quite recently, pay attention, guys, among the educated as well as among the ignorant, the grossest credulity prevailed respecting the possibility of, get this, offspring between the most dissimilar forms. Let's keep reading. That doesn't sound like crossbreeding species is possible, does it? So let's see what they're talking about here. Same article. The belief prevailing that women could become pregnant from intercourse with beasts. Okay? Laws have been framed condemning to death the parents who were judged guilty of the crime of such unnatural commerce. In 1543, for example, a woman in Avignon, France, was delivered of a child which was thought to look like a dog. And this supposed resemblance was sufficient evidence that the mother had intercourse with the dog. And she was consequently condemned with her, I love how they said this, quadruped paramour to die at the stake and was accordingly executed. People legitimately thought that you could have intercourse with animals and so forth like that. And again, when we look at Kilgore and we look at what's his face, Uriah Smith's defense, they'll cite Leviticus chapter 18 against bestiality, right? And say that's the reason why God said so. Okay.
And people have to realize that this was before what we call modern science.
Yes.
They were saying this because there was not a lot of scientific data, which is what EJ pointed to earlier, that in the 1940s and 1950s, there were great strides in this area, which caused the SDA church to panic. And this got brought back up as a blip on the radar.
Mm-hmm. Facts. Okay. Now you have to ask yourself, why would they, EJ, I'm sorry. You want to say something, brother?
No, I was saying, right. That's correct. And remember to, even historically coming up to that time, you're talking about Greek mythology was very popular as well.
Yes.
And so Greco-Roman mythology with the various human-animal hybrids, like the Minotaur and all of those, they have pictures of those, and these were prevalent beliefs.
Yeah.
And the half horse, half man, and all of these things were very prevalent in the minds of these people.
Mermaids, and that, right?
Mermaids,
androgynous people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And so people who had accentuated features, they believed were the result of humans and animals interbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, brothers and sisters, don't try to judge this thing from today's advanced scientific knowledge and all of these kind of stuff. These were primitive people, and of course, Ellen White, everything she read and social ideas she hopped on and concepts of people, she attributed divine inspiration to all of it.
Yeah.
And so she was pulling and imbibing all the nonsense of the time and attributing it to God. And that's where the problem was. And SDAs believed it with their whole heart that these were true, these were factual, and they were finding quote unquote scientific literature, the science of the day, and all of that to say, well, this is true, and she is true because she's agreeing with science here. But by the time real science got in the picture, a lot of these myths and theories were being debunked one after the other. That's why she writes so voluminously about the ills and the ghastly effects of masturbation and all of these different types of stuff, because that's what they prevalently believe. But again, as we study more advanced science, it's all buncombe. All right, so we have to keep that in mind.
Yep. All right. So, and we'll keep that in mind as far as the science is concerned, because this is contemporary stuff. And again, I invited everyone to look at that link that was provided before to the Harvard article about scientific racism. If you have the stomach for it, go check it out. That includes phrenology, racism in different ways and stuff like that there too. Again, not a CRT guy, not a social justice guy. So just, you see the shirt, it's King Jesus all day. That's where I'm at. So
well, I was just about to say, I want to emphasize that you're not just using like cultural buzzwords when you're saying these things. We're talking about like the real deal thing here, folks.
All right, keep on rolling. And what's up, Madeline? What's going on with this? All right, so let's go on here. What would they think? Okay, why would they think this way? Okay, so again, look at what she said. Since the flood, there's been amalgamation of man and beast, as may be seen. Okay. So you can see the amalgamation because people look a certain way, right? And people, according to
quick injection to magnify your point, CMB.
Yeah.
First, she says the flood came as a result of the amalgamation.
Right.
God wiped out those PCs and those people who amalgamated. And then we see, she says, now this is after the flood now. Since that time to the present. And so, which means there was not a time that it stopped.
Right.
Are you catching that?
Right.
There was not a time that it stopped. So throughout the eras up to this point, and you can look all around you, this is happening. And then they start to give tangible examples and people groups as to who are expressions of this amalgamation. Go on, bro.
Yeah, I was just looking at and shout out to Dr. Alan Davis. God bless you, man. And I was just looking at Fred Simmons' quote here, or his comment. It said that the angels won't come into there with us. If you're as old as I am in SDA, if you went to the movies, the angels didn't go with you. So that's another stream. Let's go. Let's move on. Right. So so Ellen G. White is trying to fix things out. Again, going back to the Osborne article that we saw earlier. Okay. And it might seem like it's all over the place, guys, but this is why we have to kind of do a shotgun approach so you can see everything together. Okay. Systematic, if you will, my friends. In 1901, the Review and Herald published together with a front page article, quote unquote, "Judge Not," by Ellen White, a letter from a concerned Adventist asking the question, can amalgamated blood be saved? Wait a minute. Can amalgamated blood be saved? Blood that was fused?
I thought it was just intermarriage. So I guess if an unbeliever and a believer has a child, well, the child can't be saved. Because we're talking about intermarriage, right? That's what Ellen White was saying with her quote.
Unbelievable.
Talking about a human-animal hybrid. That was amalgamated blood.
Good grief. Look at this. The editors, now A.T. Jones and Uriah Smith, replied that persons with amalgamated blood were certainly not beyond salvation, and further, that the amalgamation spoken of by Sister White did not violate or invalidate physiological law. The difficulty that science showed that hybridized creatures, i.e. There it is. The offspring, such as mules, which are the result of sexual union between horses and donkeys, were infertile and could not perpetuate their species. However, they continued, quote, might it not be that sufficient results of bestiality would appear as to have a trace of amalgamation. Results of bestiality. And you guys don't have to be gross, but you know what that is, okay? Without destroying the power of generation. The amalgamation spoken of by White is seen in what is called certain races of men. This shows that deterioration was not recognized to such a degree as to eliminate the human and transform any such offspring into beasts. Oh my. In so many words, the flagship journal of the Adventist church at the turn of the century was simply upholding the church's long-held understanding based upon White's statements and Smith's vigorous, if not authoritative, interpretation and defense of them nearly 4 decades earlier. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. The assurance offered to concerned members in 1901 is in the 1960s. One, that White spoke authoritatively, not only on a religious, but also scientific matters. And two, that amalgamated persons might still qualify as human beings and subjects of philanthropic concern, so long as they had at least some of Adam's blood in their veins, regardless of whether or not that blood had been tainted in the ancient past with the blood of animals. So, my friends, how in the world do you get the blood of animals inside the blood of humans if amalgamation does not mean amalgamation?
Yikes.
Oh, I told you I was going to get worse. Okay? Quote ain't even done yet. Here we go. But the fact that some races were degraded or quote unquote lower than others, as White had alluded, and as Smith had plainly declared, was still taken as quotes as self-evident by most Adventists, as it was by most Americans and Europeans of their day. The Hottentots, or Southern African of Southern Africa, who Smith had cited as quintessential examples of amalgamated beings, were the subjects of some particularly sensational commentary in the Review and Herald throughout the 19th century. Now what?
Okay. Man, real quick, just on this. Folks, I want you to remember, do not lose this from your focus, because the Adventist church is going to try and do the sideshow, the circus over on the side. No, look over here. This is being attributed to God. Mm-hmm. God said this through Ellen White. That's why the thumbnail of this video has the little added speech bubble on there. No, God made me say it, because that's the pivot that they take. Well, no, like W.C. Willie White, her son, tried to say in Spiritual Gifts in somewhere in the page 300s, 323 or something like that. He tries to make the claim, well, God guided her in what she needed to remove and change and when to take something out and when to add something in. Oh, it's God's fault she's saying these things. This is being pinned on God. It's not just Ellen White saying this.
Oh, boy. It's bad, though. This is not good.
Horrendous.
Okay, so let's look at some relatively recent examples of sensational commentary of amalgamated species. Again, if you're as old as me, you might remember a couple of things that you might have seen in the grocery checkout counter. So one of which is National Enquirer. The other one, Weekly World News. Okay, so a dolphin grows human arms. Okay, so yeah. Things like this. Okay, half man, half dog baffles doctors. Okay, a bat child escapes. Okay, why am I including stuff like this? This is essentially what people were thinking was happening in her day. Okay, and I'm going to prove it here in just a second again. Okay, back to Johnson's Encyclopedia. Okay, same entry. Although such beliefs have now been driven to more obscure quarters, they are by no means extinct and indeed are still very prevalent. In fact, extravagant accounts of animals of, again, mongrel origin are frequently published in the daily and weekly newspapers. Hello. Okay. It may be therefore be advisable to enter into some detail in advance to deny the truth of most of the reports. Okay. Doc says it reminds you of the X-Files. Yeah, exactly. Right. Under the general designation of hybrids are embraced all those forms whose parents belong to different varieties or species. Whether the offspring is fertile or not, the word hybrid is thus essentially similar in its meaning to the Anglo-Saxon term mongrel. Okay. Do you remember when that word was used previously? Okay. Continuing, French writers have classified the forms embraced under the general term three categories. I'm sorry, that was the way it pulled up when I did it in the PDF here. Sorry, guys. All right, so hybrids, mules, and métis. Okay, métis hybrids, mules. Okay, métis originally specially employed to designate the offspring of an Indian mother by a white father. Well, I thought it was two different races of humans, and has been extended as a generic term to humans and plants of mixed origin, i.e., the offspring of two races or varieties of the same species. Okay, so there's no hiding from this, guys. Okay. Last couple quotes from that encyclopedia here. Repeated and prolonged critical observations and experiments have amply demonstrated that i.e., belonging to decidedly different families, that fruitful union, there you go, is impossible between animals or plants or of widely different species. Such is only possible within comparatively narrow, although uncertain limits. We may therefore at once dismiss as utterly unworthy of belief the many reports of offspring from such forms that have been published by even accredited writers of natural history in past times. Such examples as the alleged case of hybrids between a hen and a duck, an opossum and a cat, a boar and a camel, an otter and a rabbit, an otter and a sheep, an otter and a cat, a raccoon and a cat, and especially women and apes, dogs or other animals. Y'all see what's happening here?
So when they say, no, she's talking about, because this is where they added the word of there in Ellen's quote, to say, no, it's talking about amalgamation of humans, and then there was amalgamation of beasts. It wasn't the two things together.
Right.
No. Look here, folks. Women and apes.
Women and dogs.
Right. You saw that lady in France was killed in the 1500s, right? Because her baby looked kind of doggish. This is terrible. Okay.
And remember this too, when they want to use the argument, oh, no. When she said races of men, you need to use the definitions of that day. Mm-hmm. That's what this is.
Here you are. How much more in that day can you get?
And again, to give an example of races of men, in Uriah Smith's 1868 defense of these statements of Ellen White, he highlighted the wild Bushmen of Africa, some tribes of the Hottentots, and perhaps the Digger Indians as the amalgamated races of men that she was referring to. Examples of amalgamation she was referring to.
Right here, fellas. I'm going to start a little bit earlier. He says, now we have ever supposed that anybody that was called a man was considered a human being. The vision speaks of all these classes as races of men. Yet in the face of this plain declaration, they foolishly assert that the visions teach that some men are not human beings. But does anyone deny the general statement contained in the extract given above? They do not. If they did, they could easily be silenced by a reference to such cases as the wild Bushmen of Africa, some tribes of the Hottentots, and perhaps the Digger Indians of our own country.
Yes.
He says, does anyone deny the general sentiment and statement that the line between animal and human has been blurred by such people like the African Bushmen, the Hottentots, and the Digger Indians? That's how he understood this. He was a contemporary of Ellen White. He knew the whites. He was the SDA Church's like first theologian. That's how he understood what she was saying.
And it cannot be argued that Ellen White was ignorant of his defense, his consistent defense, because again, the General Conference of SDA at that time were more than happy to endorse his defense, to publish it, to urge people to buy his paper, and even the whites themselves, for camp meetings that year, they took and sold 2,000 copies of Smith's book defending Ellen White's amalgamation and given the examples that he gave that she is right, it is scientifically factual, and she's a true prophet.
Here's the receipts, folks, for what EJ just said. Before Smith's quotes were published, the month before, his statements were published in July. The month before, June 12, 1866. This is what was published at the end of the Review and Herald article that day. The official organ of the SDA Church. What was resolved? That we, the members of the General and Michigan State Conference, fellas, what role does the General Conference play in the SDA Church?
Mm-hmm. It's
what
the
did
highest,
Ellen White?
It's the highest. Was it assembly?
When the General Conference is in session, it is the highest governing body with the most authority on earth, and your own personal opinions, depending on the decisions they make, must be set aside. The General Conference and the Michigan State Conference have read a portion of the manuscript read, which has been prepared by Brother Uriah Smith. This is where that quote from Uriah Smith is coming from. That's the paper they're referencing. In answer to certain objections recently brought against the visions of Sister White, we do by here express our hearty approval of the same. Another thing that's been resolved, that we tender our thanks to Brother Smith for his able defense of the visions against the attacks of their opponents. So who was that in 66? We just looked at B.F. Snook earlier.
Mm-hmm.
What was B.F. Snook making the charge against? What was the objection that he was making? She's saying that Darky wasn't made by God.
Mm-hmm.
In response to that, resolved that we tender our thanks to Brother Smith for his able defense of the visions against the attacks of their opponents.
Mm.
We would further state that in preparing these answers, we have had no consultation whatever with Sister White. Now get this, folks. We've had no consultation with Sister White, nor received any suggestion or explanation from her on any point. We take the visions as they are published and base our explanation of any apparent discrepancy on the language as it stands. So there we have it.
Busted.
This confession completely demolishes the modern arguments and reinterpretations of Adventist apologists. Uriah Smith and the General Conference leaders and pastors read Ellen White's statements as they are and concluded that she indeed meant that humans interbred with animals and certain races of men were produced. As we saw, Smith provided some examples of dark-skinned people who are created due to this amalgamation. It's a wrap. It's over.
And it's the same thing we do today. We take the visions as they are, we read them in the language as they are written, and we understand and come to the conclusions that they intend to convey. So it is not us who are butchering and destroying and being the clueless critics who are perhaps having aphasia, don't know what words mean anymore. It is the SDA apologists,
right,
who from the 1940s, for expediency and to save the face of the prophetess and the church, who had to reinterpret, and with the insertion of McCready Price of 1931 with a little of, to try to make it look like she is saying a different thing to save themselves today. It is them who are doing that, who are butchering her, who are doing violence to the text, and who are not taking her as she reads in order to save themselves. It's not us who's doing that. We are doing exactly what the General Conference did and came to the conclusion that they did. And Ellen White, of course, they were so elated with, along with her husband and the others, with Smith's defense, that they were more than happy to sell 2,000 copies of Smith's defense of her statements.
Yeah, and in my video, I mentioned that real quick, CMB. I mentioned that in the video that I uploaded a couple weeks ago about, well, Juneteenth, Adventism, and racism. Mm-hmm. And James White comments on that in the August 25th, 1880, I don't remember exactly what it is, but the quote is there in that video where he says he read over the entirety of the manuscript.
Right.
And then him and Ellen went and sold copies of White's book. It's super long, the title. It's like The Visions of Ellen G. White and something that Uriah Smith wrote that made its way into this Review and Herald article. They sold 2,000 copies of this book. And James said he read the manuscript and he was happy to go out and do so. So yeah, this idea that, Ellen never endorsed his words. Oh, yeah, right. She just went and sold 2,000 books, which at that time,
right,
that was a lot. They didn't have Amazon.
Right. And in person, you know what I mean? So you get the celebrity culture that's there anyway, James and Ellen White, the visionary, I can buy a book, I can touch her, I can kiss her hand, I can touch the hand that the inspired pen sits in. Come on, guys. You know what I mean? Like this is really, it's terrible situation. And we're not trying to make light of this. It is what it is. Okay. It is what it is. Let's finish this up real quick, guys. All right. So let me get over here again. So yeah, the one of the main problems again with Kilgore's citation of John's Encyclopedia. So that's why I'm going back to this again, and we're gonna just bury this right here. Okay. Allied species can quote procreate. That's what he said. Okay. Allied species can quote procreate, and that was his defense against that Baptist minister. Now, here's the problem: among invertebrates, there are less known and determined cases, but hybrids have been obtained between different species of bees, butterflies, etc. And many intermediate forms found in a state of nature have been supposed to be hybrids. The results thus far obtained from all these various departments may be summarized as follows. 1. Allied species are capable as a rule of pairing and producing offspring, and this capability is in definite ratio to the degree of their likeness. Okay, did you catch what the problem is? This is among invertebrates. Are you seeing this? Okay, so Dum Dum couldn't read very well, right? And was just, like many people do to this day, looking for confirmation bias. Okay, so if you are not well, all of us are online right now. So get in your Google search bar, get in your Bing or whatever you like to use, and look up what the term confirmation bias means. Okay. And this is what you'll see. Okay. So white Jesus is concerned here. All right. Let's go from here. All right. Quick recap of the facts that we've looked at so far. Johnson's New Encyclopedia, pages 1040 to 1042, does not agree with Kilgore's defense of Ellen White's statements about amalgamation. This encyclopedia entry it demonstrates the idea of hybrid dog people, and others like it are fabrications and scientific impossibilities. But Ellen does not realize this. Okay? Kilgore's defense fails. F.D. Nichols' defense fails. The E.G.W. estate defense fails. What's the other guy? McCready Price? His fails. And Ellen White's teaching here is 100% false. 100%.
Yes, sir.
No. Yeah, and I want to address this guy really quick here in the comments, this Mark Anthony. He is a regular here that likes to cause contention in the comment section. He says, does anyone here have a PhD in biology? No, Mark, we don't need a PhD in biology, just like the GC session didn't need to have a PhD in biology to understand what she was saying either. All right, Facts. CMB, continue.
Thank you. Oh gosh, I was going to say something about third grade education, but I'm going to stop.